always been interested in politics, international affairs, that kind of stuff. So I figured I could probably write about it. But I didn't just want to, show up at a meeting in the middle of the year, have nobody know me, and maybe try to make my entry. I figured there was a better way I could handle it. So over Christmas break, I worked on an op-ed, my very first one, and I came back. I sent it to the editor of the conservative publication on campus. Out of the blue, like that, I said, "Hey, I'd like to write for you guys. Here's something for you." I figure I would make his life easier, not just ask for, a favor, basically. From there, he was delighted to see that, first day back on campus, invited me for coffee. We talked for an hour. After that, he said, "Would you like to be, an assistant editor on staff?" Basically the most junior position on staff. But I think just by putting myself forward as, I have work that I can offer you, I showed that I was going to contribute. I wasn't just going to be kind of dragged along for the ride. From there, I spent a couple years with the campus publication over there. But at some point, I realized that I had a really good story, a story about a campus activist movement that, was of course of interest to people on campus, but the people on campus mostly already knew about it, actually. So it might be of more interest to people off campus. But I was thinking about it and I thought, I'm a college student. Why would anyone care what I think? And it turns out that instinct, while mostly right, is in certain instances incorrect, actually. Because when it comes to, say, my views on foreign policy as a college junior at Stanford, it's true. Most people do not care what I think. They can find people who have more knowledge and expertise. When it comes to if I think Trump is evil or if I think Trump is brilliant, again, most people are not so interested. But when it comes to what's happening on my campus, it turns out I'm more of an expert than just about every single person reading that article. And so I sent it to National Review online. Again, just a cold email, I think, into submissions@nationalreview.com or, whatever it is. And I was lucky enough to get a yes. And the thing that people don't realize is the first yes is really the only difficult one, because from then on, you have a real person's email address and they've worked with you. They have some trust in you. They're willing to read all of your articles again thoroughly. And I'm not sure if college students realize this, but for instance, at the Wall Street Journal, just into our general submissions inbox, we get more than 200 submissions every single day. And of those, we usually take 0. I'm sorry to say. Sometimes we take 1, maybe 2. But most of the articles that we run are sent to, real people's email addresses. They're sent by established writers, experts, politicians, straight to our bosses, basically, or to junior editors like me. So once you get somebody's email address, I kept using it. And when I had a good story, again, about education in particular, about what I knew, I kind of built up credibility with an editor to the point where he would allow me to expand a little bit beyond that. So maybe that's a good place to start for that answer.
Yeah. So how frequently were you writing on campus until you kind of felt like you had the hang of it and you were confident enough to kind of do a cold email to National Review?
It would have been from halfway through freshman year until junior year. So a fair bit.
Yeah. So you were writing super frequently ahead of time. Once you got the email to National Review, I guess my next question is how can you tell which stories had legs on campus that could help it extend outside of just Stanford?
Well, I suppose there are certain things national media, and especially national conservative media, are interested in, right? I mean, there is a big interest, I won't be telling you anything new, in campus protests, in issues having to do with the core curriculum, issues having to do with bias against conservatives, and I would say in general kind of malfeasance by professors and campus administrators. So many of these, when they happen, and they always happen, will arise as kind of easy sells at first. But again, I think the biggest thing isn't to look at it that way, but just to think about, I need a good story. And the truth is, there are good stories everywhere. I don't know if people realize it, but every department at your, university, every sports team, every organization there has some real anxieties about some future change. They have hopes for some other change. They are furious about one person who is ruining everything, but nobody can say it. One person is kind of maneuvering for power, but nobody trusts them. Like these things are all happening, and the people in those organizations all know about it and talk about it with each other. You just need to talk to them, and most of the time, they love telling you. People can't wait to tell reporters. They basically like to snitch on each other. It's true. So I think there really is a lot of reporting work to be done, and then you'll find stories everywhere. And if it's a good story, chances are people will be interested on and off campus. And just actually one more thing, I do opinion writing. So you may be thinking, okay, so what's he talking about, reporting for? Isn't that totally separate? And the answer is absolutely not. I think that's the biggest misconception that people have about opinion writing. The best opinion pieces present new facts. And how do you get new facts? You report. You always have to ask yourself, especially when you're a young writer whose name nobody knows and no one has reason to really care about intrinsically, you have to ask, why should they care what I think? And the best answer is because I have something new to tell them. New arguments, yes, but those actually tend to be rather difficult. And most of the time where you do get a new argument, it's because you found a new fact on which to base that argument. So I would say the lost art of, opinion writing has to do with reporting.
So I guess my next question is kind of that move from campus writing to professional. So, let's say you get, a handful of pieces that you pitch published in a handful of outlets. And now you're kind of thinking about, okay, this might be what I want to do long term. Mm-hmm. So how do you kind of start, I guess, to, first I get internships or fellowships or positions, that kind of move you up the ladder, and what are publications looking for, on that front as you apply to these sorts of things?
Sure. Well, I mean, many people feel very nervous and apprehensive about what to do during their summers. I know I certainly did. And the truth is, you don't have to rush, at least at the start. I mean, you shouldn't feel like if you're not doing an internship for a newspaper the summer after your freshman year, you're somehow behind. I mean, there aren't many jobs like that out there as internships for, younger college students. My first couple summers, I learned more. I did programs with the Hertog Foundation. It was the Hertog Political Studies program, which I think had a really foundational influence on me. And then my second summer, I did a program with the Tikva Fund, which is the, I guess, Jewish version of the Hertog Foundation, you might say. Okay, so, I met some people. I read a lot. I think I learned tons, and it definitely got me more interested in politics, political ideas, political theory. But it didn't necessarily it didn't set me up for a journalism career, and that was totally fine. Junior summer, I think it is time to pay attention to that kind of stuff, because after your senior year, you're going to be applying for a post-graduation job, and if it's with a publication, they're going to want some sense that you've done this kind of thing previously. Now, the key is to make yourself a good candidate for the internship or for the job after that before you've written your application, before you show up in the interview room. Because you might ace the application, you might ace the interview, but you also might not, right? I mean, who knows? So, you will want to have written for some, I think, professional publications before you try to work for a professional publication. Think about it this way. When I applied to be an intern at National Review, I had already published 7 opinion articles for them, which is to say I had already passed their test 7 times, right? I think that is what that means. And you don't have to pass it 7 times. I would say you have to pass it once. And once you've passed it once, you are presumptively ahead of everyone else in the running for it. So I think my application was fine. I think my interview was okay. A genius editor from National Review called me up from Salt Lake City and just grilled me on an article that I had written for the Stanford Review, and just got me to defend its premises philosophically. I think I barely held up. I'm not sure if that got me the job, if that put me ahead, or if that set me back. I think basically they just saw this guy showed that he can already write for us. So what's the worst that could happen? So I think that's the way you go at it. And then once I got there, I was only able, that only made me a more attractive candidate for every other writing engagement, every other job, because that summer, National Review likes to let its interns write all the time on its website, which to the point where it's almost a little much. So I arrived on day 1 with 2 article ideas, I guess, and we had a pitch meeting. So I gave both of them, and they said, okay, write them both. Okay, so I did that. Then the next day I had 2 more, until I realized they were just going to let me write basically whatever I had. So I wrote 60 articles, 60, in a summer for them. And then when I get back on campus and I send a book review in a cold email to Commentary magazine, I say, hi, I'm Elliot Kaufman. I've written 60 articles for National Review online. And all of a sudden, I'm not just a student. I'm something more. So it just kind of builds and builds further from there.
Yeah. So I guess I think, kind of 2 processy kind of questions. So one, okay, let's say you're at a school that isn't like, let's say a Stanford, right? No flashy name, but you're still looking for stories there. Do you think kind of the name of the school has an influence on how it gets published? And if it does, how do you overcome that?
I think it probably does have an influence. I think I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said otherwise. The conservative media especially is more interested in bashing on Stanford than it is on a state school. It's just probably a fact. But I think regardless, a good story is a good story. And I think about it in the way that we publish at the Wall Street Journal, for instance. If you have a really good story about a, say, government subsidy gone wrong in West Virginia, that's an amazing story. We will, publish that every single time. It's probably of more interest to more of our readers if that's in New York or if that's in California, and these are just unavoidable facts. But if it's a good story, I don't think the school should hold it back. I think basically being at a very prestigious school can compensate for it being maybe not as good of a story. But if it's a good story, somebody will take it for sure.
So let's talk about kind of the first job process. Yeah. So you've gotten a good internship at a publication, gotten solid bylines, and you kind of have a body of work that you can show off. What makes someone want to bring you on as a full-time employee? How is that kind of the same or different than a summer internship?
Mm-hmm. I think it is different, and it's different in this way. I mean, people overestimate how much writing has to do with it. I think in these cases, writing is more a signal of credibility than it is of other things, because at most places, as a first year employee, they're not going to want you to be writing a ton of opinion articles for them. They have more experienced people. And I think people focus too much on the writing and forget that there are many other skills there. So, what do they want to hear from you? They want to hear, yes, that you can write, but also that you can edit and that you can fact check. I think those are probably the three biggest. Research also goes along with it, and that has to do with writing and also fact checking. But you want to show that you can do everything and that you're not going to come there and think that you should be in the paper every day, because if they start to get that sense from you, they think that's a problem. Like we don't want that kind of presence in the office. We want someone who's able to contribute in many different ways. And so I'd say one thing that you should try to do is to get some experience at the college level for sure, but if possible at the professional level, doing editing and fact checking. Now that's not so easy to get that kind of experience. At National Review, I was able to get a little bit of it. They are chronically understaffed. So I was able to do some editing of blog posts at, what's it called? The Corner there, which helped. But one option that I think was massively helpful to me was that I had an on-campus job at the Stanford Alumni Magazine. It was, I think, 10 hours a week, which isn't so much, but isn't nothing either. And this was a, professional magazine. Everybody who worked there had previously worked at a local newspaper or kind of trade publication. And these people really knew the work of journalism. And my first job there for my first 2 months was as unsexy as possible. They had me fact checking obituaries and just going through and reading about what we had written about all these people, fact checking it against our source material and then other kind of online obituaries for them. But it proved to be wonderful experience in my Wall Street Journal interview. They loved that, hearing that I had for, 2 months straight kind of devoted myself to that kind of journalism grunt work. The equivalent of like working at McDonald's or something for journalism. People love hearing that. And I think that set me up pretty well. So if there are any opportunities like that at your school, I would definitely go after that. Not only was it good in the interview, but I got a reference from their senior editor, again, a professional journalist and editor. That says something. And I even ended up writing an application essay that kind of built off of that, which the people in the room told me afterwards that it probably got me that job there. So I would say definitely pay attention to all facets of journalism, not just writing. In fact, you want to signal that you're not all about writing and that you're willing to help out and be basically a team player.
Yeah. So one thing to the audience, if you have questions that come up as we talk, there's a Q&A tab over there on your right. Feel free to submit those questions. We'll do some Q&A at the end. So kind of to shift topics just a little bit here, I'm going to ask a question that I think is like, it's almost philosophical in its nature. So what makes a good opinion article? I know you mentioned new information for readers. I think that's important, but kind of what other qualities are out there for it?
Like I told you before this call, it's much easier to answer what makes a bad opinion article. There are tons of things, and maybe I can mention some of them. But for what makes a good opinion article, I mean, I think, well, let's just kind of go through it from the start. Take this pretty mechanically. The first sentence. I mean, as an editor, for instance, on every Thursday, so after this, I read through the 200 plus submissions that get sent to the Wall Street Journal. When I'm doing that, it is shocking to me every single time how many have a first line that says nothing new or nothing intriguing. For instance, if you're writing about the controversy over the election, many people would have a first sentence that would say something like, peaceful transitions of power are important in democracies. I'm kind of falling asleep already. I already knew that. And so did every other reader. And when you're in a situation when you have to read through 200 of them in a night, if the first sentence isn't good and the second sentence doesn't catch your interest and the third doesn't, I don't know how much further you're reading on. So don't think that they're going to make it to your fourth paragraph where you really get to the point. They might never. So there's no room to clear your throat at the start of it. Okay. You got to get in there. At the end. Okay. Sorry, I'll skip. At the end, I feel many people received some advice in high school or maybe in college that they should end their essay and by extension, their article by pivoting to broader implications. I see this all the time. I think that's fine advice in some cases if you have some broader implications like that. But there is nothing worse than reading someone who clearly has no broader implications to offer, but feels compelled at the same time to make that kind of change at the end. I mean, you see great pieces that make strong arguments and then just make themselves worse at the end and just end weakly by pivoting to, and this is important not only here, but in other countries, because here in the US, people look to what we do in other countries. Okay, I mean, that's kind of like, a throwaway. So, I mean, listen, I don't know if how helpful it is to say, but end on a strong line, oftentimes that can be a telling fact something that proves the lie to what, somebody else said, exposes a contradiction, a great quote. There's, a million ways, a broader implication even, if it works. But you definitely shouldn't feel bound by any formula like that. What matters is to start in a sharp way, and to also end on a sharp note. In between, okay? All the substance in between. I want to go back to reporting and new facts. People make a classic mistake, which is they write columns. They write opinion columns, forgetting that no one has hired them to be an opinion columnist. Okay, so at the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, elsewhere, we have paid opinion columnists. Okay, I edit Karl Rove and Bill McGurn. These guys have years and years of experience. They've been out there, learned things. People care what they think. So they're writing an opinion column, which I would say is very different from an op-ed. Okay, they have the luxury of sitting back a little and kind of opining. Okay, although even then it's made stronger by leading with the facts, but they can do it. Okay, you college students or me, junior, editor, writer, we can't do that. Okay, we just can't. So I always say, let the facts speak. Really, really do that. People don't realize they hear opinion article and they think it's all about how well they can put their own opinion, not realizing that the most effective way to do that is to just present the facts in such a way that there is no other conclusion but yours. So I would say less assertions, way less sweeping assertions, less rhetoric in general. Lead with the facts, and then once you've made that case, then you kind of insert that sharp line, okay? And then the reader nods along with you. You've kind of built up credibility with the reader by telling them something new, by telling them something factually accurate, rather than hitting them over the head with your own opinion. So to sum up, a good opinion article has to have new facts. It has to let those facts speak and not smother them or put off readers with rhetoric. And then by building that argument through factual building blocks, then the argument shines through, and then you kind of put a very sharp note on it, and that combination makes it an effective article.
That's great. No, and I think you hit a lot of the bad opinion article things as we went along as well. It seems to me like the automatic rejection list is, something along the lines of a bad lead, no new facts, or just kind of, armchair punditry, and basically not kind of zeroing in on probably any specific issue and dancing around and jumping back and forth to lots of different things at once.
And actually on that point, so I read and edit student writing every week. I don't know if you guys know, but the Wall Street Journal has a feature called Future View, and in it we actually publish student writing every single week on the website. And we basically put out a writing prompt on the website. To find it, you can go to futureview.wsj.com, which you definitely should do. We put out a new one every Tuesday night. and you have all week until, I guess, the following Monday to send in a response, and then we publish the best ones on the next Tuesday night, and so it just keeps going as a loop. But through it, I read student writing all the time, and this isn't long writing; it's 250 words. But still, you'd be shocked how many student writers try to do too much. And I think this is often a problem in longer opinion articles as well. Number one, opinion articles shouldn't be that long. Our average article, our like median opinion article in the Wall Street Journal is probably like 750 words, 800 words. Only big articles get, 1,000 words, 1,500 words. So I think in many cases, students can be more succinct. I know my student writing, the average was probably like 1,300 words, but that's just because it's easier to write long than short. Easier, not better. But students, I tend to see that students feel they have proved a point before they actually have, and this happens often. And so they'll half prove a point and then jump on to the next one and then half prove that and then jump on to the next one and half prove that. And I don't think they realize it, but when you read that, that's just the ultimate recipe for getting the reader to have no trust in you whatsoever. Because maybe they're suspicious after the first one. They have an objection that they thought of that they think is a pretty obvious one, but you didn't mention it. So they don't know what to think of you. And then you do that again and again. And by the end, they think this guy's, I wouldn't trust a thing that guy said, even if he did prove it. So I think make less arguments, focus on less things in an opinion article, but do it well, thoroughly, facts, all of those things help. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Oh, no, that's it's an important point, and it's, I think, a mistake, we see pretty often. I think the next kind of question I have just for op-eds is a little bit about tone. So I know, sometimes people want to emulate opinion writers that are more maybe write more polemic articles versus thoughtful articles. What kind of tone do you think, I guess, is most effective in conveying your point? And is there kind of a range that you like to pull from, or do you kind of stick to the same tone in each piece?
That's a very good question. I think of this as the Kevin Williamson question. That's what I would call it. When I was in college, I was reading a lot of Kevin Williamson at National Review, and probably was trying to emulate him in some of my college writings, maybe even without knowing it. If you think about it, there's kind of a problem there, because he's trying to emulate David Foster Wallace, I think is fairly clear. David Foster Wallace is an excellent writer, a novelist. Novelists are usually the best of all writers. He's not as good as David Foster Wallace, although I like him very much. And then I'm not as good as him, and you probably aren't either. So, and there's nothing worse than to see someone who isn't a good writer try to sound like a novelist, okay? Especially a more experimental one. So I would definitely caution against that. And if I tried to do that, and probably I did try to do that with my first couple articles at the Wall Street Journal, and I was edited very heavily. Your question is a difficult one to answer because different publications have different tones. The Wall Street Journal's tone is more subdued. We do still think of ourselves as a business paper and kind of write accordingly, even when we're not writing about business. Other publications, especially magazines, allow for a more a different tone. I don't know, more whimsical, perhaps. But in general, okay, I can give one very helpful thing here. in general, I would caution you against moralizing. That is one type of tone. I guess you would call it self-righteous. But it's easy to tell yourself you're not being self-righteous, you're just righteous. That's the problem. So I would, in fact, that's the easiest thing to do. So I would just say moralizing. That can be good or bad. Some moralizing is necessary, but in general, I would caution against it. You should think of your reader as another rational human being that has their own moral views and doesn't need to be lectured to, doesn't need to be hectored about something. And there's certainly nothing they hate more than some student trying to lecture them, trying to, tell them how life goes. That's funny. I see that in the chat. But so watch out for that kind of tone. You can make, and oftentimes it comes in at the end of an argument. Someone is making a good, compelling argument. Let's say probably the easiest example lately, although who knows how relevant it'll be going forward, would be making an anti-Trump argument. There are many of them. So someone builds up an argument perfectly. Okay, here's what Trump did. Okay, here's why this hasn't worked. Here's what he said about it. Here's why that's not true. Okay, excellent argument, building it up. The finishing, blow on the argument, instead of just concluding it and leaving it for the reader to kind of make their own assessment of it. No, they never do that. For some reason, there's always this kind of jump to, throwing out words, liar, racist. How could you support somebody like this? Clearly he's throwing away all whatever, like, and just any kind of language like that. It shouldn't even matter what you feel about President Trump. It's just when you do that kind of thing, not only do you alienate people, but in most cases you haven't made the argument as perfectly as you think you did. And so readers notice that and then see you getting on your, high horse, and they hate you. So I would agree.
So what are, some good examples of opinion writers that you think students should read and maybe try to emulate and not maybe necessarily exactly or be the emulation of the emulation, like you said, but kind of solid writers that you think, write it in a way that's easily transferable?
Yeah. There are many, there are many opinion columnists, including Wall Street Journal opinion columnists that I would recommend to you, but I'm hesitant because I've said you should not try to be an opinion columnist. So for instance, I would recommend that people read Walter Russell Mead's column every single week, and you'll learn tons about U.S. grand strategy. But I wouldn't recommend that you necessarily write that way because you're not Walter Russell Mead. You haven't written seminal foreign policy books, so you just can't write in the same way. That's how it goes. One person who I would recommend for an interesting reason, my favorite opinion writer is probably Helen Andrews. She might be crazy. I don't know. I sometimes wonder, but nobody does more research for her articles than her. And it makes you think, because there's one type of opinion article where you come up with an idea and you write it that night. And often those are very good articles, but I mean, it's actually clear to me that she reads maybe on average 2 or 3 books for each article that she writes. So I don't say that you have to go to that extreme, but just understand that there are some people out there who are really putting in the work, so, a little bit of internet research while you're writing is good for some good for some occasions, but if you really want to write essays that people are still, referring back to years afterward, you have to put in that kind of work. I think she's also a brilliant writer. Her prose is beautiful. So emulate that too. But I'd say the work there is good. I mean, if you do want to see some people who write in a way that seems to me more novelistic, like people who are really good writers, I think the writer Wesley Yang is excellent at that stuff. Oscillates between very cold, detached, sharp sentences, and then wonderfully experiential, emotional sentences. But that seems to me like an excellent writer who's been doing this for 2 decades, maybe, kind of at the top of his game. So, maybe stuff like that isn't the best thing to follow. But, if you want to see what that kind of work is at its best, I would go look there.
And for the students who may not know, Wesley Yang is at Tablet Magazine, and Helen Andrews is now at the American Conservative. So, I think both of those publications have some pretty good writing in there that you can see. So we're going to do some audience Q&A. Audience, please ask some more Q&A. We have some good ones here to start with. So the first question here is from Harry. So his question is, what are some tips to handle a highly controversial or sensitive topic for an op-ed? Especially on a college campus context.
Yeah. I mean, I think of one time that I kind of flubbed it on that point in college. We have a Latino themed residence at Stanford, which since the 80s has had this mural in its dining hall, which is called The Last Supper of Chicano Heroes. And it's basically the Last Supper, but with various different people inserted in. And in the place of Jesus, they have Che in there. And so I just wrote an article. I just fired off some article being like, this is absolutely ridiculous, right? This guy's a murderer, number one. This is, this must be offensive to kind of Cuban American students, et cetera, et cetera. These people who are doing it, what are they even thinking? Okay, on and on. Article wrote itself, took no effort. Ended up sparking a huge controversy. And I realized there are things, even though I think I was clearly right, there are things I could have done to put myself in a better position, just basically to have written a stronger article. It actually might have made a difference and caused some things maybe to change, caused some people to reconsider their views. Because, firing off an op-ed in the conservative publication was just immediately perceived as an attack on the Latino community at Stanford, or at least the Latino organized community at Stanford, which rallied and came back at me. And I think the basic thing is talk to people, actually put in some of the work of reporting, get quotes from people on both sides. I didn't even talk to any Cuban American students. I'm not sure I even knew any on, but I'm sure I could have found one, right? They are there. I would say the best thing that you can do is talk to other people and hear how they think. And oftentimes you can speak through them in your own article to make it not about you attacking them, but to make it a piece about what people on campus really think about this. Because, the truth is that the Latino themed dorm was run by Mexican American students who had a totally different view of Che as Cuban American students did. And I heard from some of those Cuban American students afterward, but it occurred to me, why wasn't I speaking to people beforehand? The other reason I say speak to people is because that's the best way to really empathize with their point of view. And I mean, you should empathize because it's a good thing to do, but it also makes better writing. I mean, it's really obvious if you're writing from a place of caring about people or not. It shines through. I guarantee it. And actually, I would extend that on just to one other point that I wanted to make, but didn't. I feel that I probably, when I was in college, and probably many conservatives in college, what shines through from their writing is that they hate their college, and I think that's a huge mistake. And of course, all the incentives and even some of the tips that I've given you could be interpreted to mean basically like snitch on your college to the national media to put yourself forward, but make your college look badly. And there are many things that when your college does poorly should get national attention, but there are good and bad ways to do that. And I think conservatives often give off the impression to the rest of the campus that they hate their school, which only makes them kind of unattractive on campus, because most people love their college, actually. And I think the proper attitude for conservatives should be to love what's best about their college, and particularly their college, because each one has its own unique traditions, practices, and to try to bring the college back to some of those things, or try to emphasize what's already there and is still there. Anyways, just wanted to say that.
Yeah. So I'm going to combine kind of two questions here a little bit. First, and it's about the all-important pitch email. So how do you make a pitch email stand out in an editor's inbox? And then secondly, when you're emailing an editorial magazine like National Review versus an established newspaper like the Journal, is there kind of a different way you should frame your pitch, to make it come through better?
Great question. Well, the first thing is, if at all possible, try to get a real person's email address. Okay, that will improve your chances a ton, and that means no submissions at email address. It can be a tenuous thing. Like I actually got my first piece published in the Wall Street Journal as a junior. A journalism class I was in got canceled for that day, and I had an hour, and I was like, oh, why don't I try to write something? And it ended up being this, and I was so happy. But the way that it ended up happening is, so I did the summer program at the Tikva Fund, where they brought in Brett Stevens to be a speaker. I had asked him a question at that event, which he had liked, and we had spoken a bit afterward as well, and that was it. Okay. And then a year later, with no further interaction from him, I found his email address because it's listed at the bottom of all of his columns, and sent my article to him. Now, I didn't even know enough to know that he actually has nothing to do with, what op-eds make it in, but it didn't matter. Like, he was a real person there, and he saw it and he liked it. And so he passed it on to the person who actually did have that authority, and that person said yes. So, okay, number one, email address. Number two, please keep it short. Okay, it will definitely help you. If you want them to read it and not just skip past it to the article itself, and presumably you do want them to read it because that's why you're doing it. If it's too long, they will just skip it. Okay, so my basic format would be to say, hi, I'm this person. One sentence about your qualifications. I'm sending you an op-ed on this topic. Preferably put that in a way that would sound interesting to many of their readers. And then one sentence, I argue XYZ. here's the article below. Let me know what you think. Thank you for your time. Okay, that's it. So I would say very short. And again, you want to frame these things in a way that's to your advantage. So when I was doing it, I would say, hi, I'm Elliot Kaufman. I'm a student at Stanford University. I've written for XYZ, and here's my article on this. Here's what I argue. Boom. So, straight and to the point.
Yeah, and I think, kind of a follow-up. So for, a conservative media publication versus, let's say, a local major daily newspaper or something like that, what's kind of the news judgment difference, and how does that shape, or I guess editorial judgment difference, and then how does that shape your pitch?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you should know. Also, one thing I should add is that at most places, they really do want to see a full draft of the op-ed, not just the idea. And the reason being, you have no clue if the article is going to be good just from seeing the idea. There are a million ways to screw up an excellent idea. So no one wants to give any guarantees just based off an idea, generally. Different places. Yeah, you got to think about what piece is right for what publication. You just have to. National Review is more interested in intra-conservative movement disagreements between writers than the Wall Street Journal. In general, the Wall Street Journal isn't so interested about disagreements between writers. We care about disagreements between policymakers, that kind of thing. But many magazines see themselves as in a different kind of conversation, in conversation with each other. Okay, so that's just something that you should know and take that into account. I mean, one of the things is and it shocks me how many people don't do this. I only didn't say it because it sounded so obvious, but it must not be. But you should really read the publications that you send articles to. There's no better way to know what kind of article the Wall Street Journal publishes than by reading the Wall Street Journal every day for a couple weeks. You'll know after that for sure, no question. But many people seem to not do that and send us stuff that never in a million years would we publish.
So this is a question from Manon. Spoke of leading strongly on an op-ed. Do you recommend leading anecdotally with facts, with a thesis, etc.?
I wouldn't say anyone. Saying thesis is the one that worries me, because there's a way to just straightforwardly say your thesis. That's good, but many of those could also be a boring sentence kind of thing. So, you should lead with whichever one of those you think is, interesting and will grab your reader. One thing I would caution against, though, is leading with a quote. I think people often do this, but unless the quote is really, really good, usually it's not a good idea, because you start with the quote and the reader doesn't know who the quote's from. So there's a little confusion, and there should be a payoff to kind of justify that bit of confusion.
All right. So one, current event question here, and it's a bit of a journalistic ethics question. What did you think of the Miles Taylor anonymous op-ed situation and how that was handled? Do you think New York Times was, on solid ground granting him anonymity?
I never really studied journalism, so I don't. I'm not with it on the current theory of journalistic ethics, but I think at the Wall Street Journal we probably would not have published that. I've never seen us publish an anonymous opinion article. In general, giving people anonymity is a problem, especially when they're making accusations. Because, first of all, even for the credibility of the accusation, part of its credibility comes from a person is putting their name on this and could suffer from it reputationally or, worse otherwise, if that accusation ends up not being true. So to publish a whole opinion article chock full of accusations without someone's name on it struck me as a little irresponsible. But again, I did not go to journalism school, so I don't know.
So what's the future view question this week?
The future view question this week. Hold on. I should know this because I wrote it, but okay, I'm on the website. So we basically go with something topical. And so we made it, should the Biden administration cancel student debt? There you go. I mean, by the way, you can tell something about, like, you can tell something interesting from that question. We're publishing students, but everything I told you previously about, asking why do people care about my, like, why do people care about what I have to say? You'll notice student debt is a question on which students have something to say. So we definitely try to stick to questions in which there's a unique student perspective that our readers, most of whom are not students, want to read. Anyways, maybe that can be helpful in how you think about your op-ed ideas.
Yeah. Okay. It looks like we have one last question here. So what do you think about using literary techniques in op-eds? Can they be beneficial or should they be avoided?
Literary techniques. What do we mean?
It is a vague question. But I mean, I would say,
Metaphor.
Think of like a Tom Wolfe, deal, right? How would you see, how much students can use that kind of storytelling technique in op-eds versus not?
Yeah, I mean, these questions are very tough to answer because there are so many different ways to do the job well. But each of them, like, if you do it poorly, it will be poor. So I think the most useful advice I can give is to just say, in general, what students need to correct for. And in general, I think students are guilty of overwriting, of doing too much of that kind of thing, of aiming too high and then not being able to pull it off. So I would say keep that in mind. I mean, when I think about student writers who get op-eds in the Wall Street Journal, I mean, we have one who attends a school that I hadn't heard of. It's like South Dakota School of Mines or something like that. She studies engineering and has been able to write for us consistently just by doing reporting work. And it's unbelievable, but it turns out many people kind of leave things on the table for you. So, for instance, when Trump did that Mount Rushmore speech in South Dakota, it was a huge media event, and there are all these things being said about the people who, kind of went there for it. But that was nearby, so she went there and just talked to the people there, just talked to average people there, and kind of surveyed the scene. Like, who were the different segments of the crowd, roughly speaking? Why did they show up? What did they think of this? What did they think of the speech? And that's an excellent article right there. A Wall Street Journal op-ed, and a student could do that because most mainstream journalists didn't bother to actually do that. They were so fixated on what Trump was saying that we got like 100 articles of people saying the same thing and then kind of commenting on it, that just doing basic reporting work made a great op-ed. And you know what? A unique one. So I would say that should be a, example for all of you.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for spending an hour with us tonight, Elliot. And I hope all of you in the audience, if you're interested in journalism as a career, the Collegiate Network internships and fellowship application will be up soon. You can go do that future view question on student debt. And
also, I just add, great thing. about it. If you have nothing interesting to say about student debt, don't write anything. Wait till next week. There's a new question every week. So wait for your pitch and then swing away.
Exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and best of luck, students, as you head into the end of the semester and finals. And we will probably do some more of these next semester. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.